that you were talking about earlier. This ab, the word ab means white. It was
That's right.
And it was a garment worn by or worn in the Greco-Roman world, and it was similar to the soutane worn in the Middle East. However, those of authority wore abs of high quality, high embroidery, meaning they wore the best cloth. Some modern style ab have collars, which includes the necessity for amice, and I hadn't spoke about that yet, but the spiritual purpose remind the priest, as you said, Metropolitan Scholars, of baptism, when he was clothed in white to signify his freedom from sin and purity of new life and Christian dignity. Moreover, the book of Revelation described the saints who stood around the altar of the Lamb in heaven as these are the ones who have survived the great period of trial. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Revelation 7:14. So in the same way, the priest must offer the Mass with purity of body and soul and with the dignity befitting Christ's priesthood. The former vesting prayer was, "Make me white, O Lord, and purify my heart so that being made white in the blood of the Lamb, I may deserve an eternal reward." I tell you, that really has scriptural and spiritual meaning, that ab.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, every garment that a priest puts on is usually accompanied by a prayer.
Yes.
The chasuble, which goes over the alb, is accompanied by the prayer, O Lord, thou who hast said, thy yoke is easy and thy burden is light. Grant that I may bear it so as to attain thy grace.
Yes.
And you think about that, what a beautiful, beautiful prayer. And a thought occurred to me while you were speaking that we enter the temple of the Lord, and it is a holy place, and it is ornate with icons and in the Catholic world, statues, things that remind us of the communion of saints and so forth. For someone to enter that space in garments that are plain,
mm-hmm.
would not be fitting, and so the ornateness of the vestments really does enable the priest to move in a way that he almost is like a chameleon, that we don't notice the man, but instead we focus on the presence of God.
And I would like to add this. Well, a lot of people might think that vestments are odd, but if you look at our society, you see that we have a judge that wears a vestment. We have people that are in authority that wear certain garments to represent who they are and what they are. And vestments is just another way of showing the authority that God has given us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk about the miscomprehension of the purpose and use of priestly vestments, one particular issue comes to mind, and I'm sure you've all heard this, when someone will say to you, "Why does the bishop wear that funny-shaped hat?" And it's really funny because they have no idea what it is, so they refer to it as a hat. But if we look at the book of Leviticus, and if we look at Hebrews, Galatians, that we will see mention of specific liturgical headwear worn by Aaron, which later became adopted by the Christian church. Mm-hmm. And this funny-shaped hat is called a mitre, and it is a symbol of episcopal office. And so what have you guys, has your experience been about the bishop's hat?
Well, in the Western usage, you have the double-pointed mitre, and that is considered to represent the teaching authority of the office of bishop, specifically Old Testament and New Testament authority for teaching. They have what they call, I've forgotten the word for it now, but they're the ribbons going down the back of the hat, which originally were used to tie it under the chin to keep the hat from moving over much. So,
right. And the thing is that when God was instructing Moses in the design of the Levitical priesthood vestures, he modeled the mitre, which was instructed to be made of fine linen cloth.
Yeah.
And then we, after the Levitical priesthood down through the century, we seem to lose track of this, but then it comes back approximately in the 11th century, where there's a mention made by Pope Leo the Ninth in a letter granting a bishop somewhere within the Roman Church the honor of wearing a mitre. And this is where we begin to see the development. And I believe in the Eastern Church that the mitre, which takes the more formal form of a crown, as would be worn by a secular monarch, developed as a way of showing Christ as the high priest and king, and that was modeled on the turban of the Ottoman Turks, I believe. And so what we find is that, would you say that the purpose of vestments is that these are donned, first of all, because they are a biblical injunction, but secondly, to demonstrate or to symbolize to the secular world the divine kingship of Christ. Anybody like to chime in on that?
Well, the prophecy tells us that we who persevere in the faith to the end will receive crowns in heaven. We also understand every priest to be a stand-in, a deputy for Jesus during the celebration of the Divine Liturgy. Jesus being the high priest of our faith, and those who are ordained and consecrated being deputies, stand-ins. So there's a certain appropriateness to the wearing of a temporal headdress associated with the office.
Mm-hmm. Right. And again, if we look at the connections with the early Jewish disciples of God, or followers, is that there was always that junction of having males within Judaism covering their head as a way of being reminded that they're always under the divine leadership of God. And when the bishops wear their head coverings, it's pretty much with the same idea. So on one hand, it shows the office of priest, but on the other hand, it shows the humility of the priest to the King Christ. And so I think that the concept of vestiture and holiness, which are interrelated, are the two things that those outside the church find most difficult to grasp, because they go hand in glove. And I'd like for us to think about ending with the concept of how the high priest would vest himself before he was and washed himself before he felt secure and ready to enter into the Holy of Holies. And if we look at this vestiture in this light, is that it's also interesting to remember that although the high priest only entered the Holy of Holies once a year on the Day of Atonement, but he also wore a special rope around his waist, because no one else could go into the Holy of Holies but the high priest. And the rope was to be able to extract him from the Holy of Holies in case he died or was injured while he was in there. And so this signifies the basic concept of holiness, of presence, the holiness of mind, and it's symbolized through the holiness of dress. So would you like to inject any closing thoughts?
In our domestic worship, we are an authentic church that we follow the ancient teaching that even started back as far as Aaron and Moses, and it continued to go into involve into the vestments that we wear now, which are to show holiness of God.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bishop John Mark. Bishop Cyril Mark, the Marx brothers.
Saint Jerome asserted the divine religion has one dress in the service of sacred things, another in ordinary intercourse and life. For the first few centuries of our history, the church continued to refine who wore what, when, and how, until about the year 800, when liturgical norms for vesting were basically standardized. I would say that this holy tradition of who wears what, when, and how is still prevalent in our ancient church, and what a priest or a bishop, even a deacon, wears in the Holy Mass or liturgy of the church. And we will continue that holy tradition.
Thank you, Bishop Cyril. Mar Dawood, closing remarks?
Well, I'm always struck by the continuum between the Levitical codes and what we do today in the church. The orarion or stole is similar to the prayer shawl or tlalit of the Jewish priests. The chasuble that we wear, especially the old Roman chasuble, corresponds to the ephod of the Jewish priests. The one difference being that the ephod was embellished with semi-precious stones, 12 semi-precious stones, one for each of the tribes of Israel, whereas the chasuble tends to be embellished and embroidered with gold thread, and embroidery, some